In November 1994, a 26-year-old mother was found dead in her bed in a small house outside Portland, Oregon. Her 18-month-old daughter was in a crib in the next room. The medical examiner initially ruled the death consistent with a drug overdose. Case closed within 6 weeks. But 30 years later, the woman in that crib, now a grown adult, proved that her mother didn't overdose. She was murdered. Her name was Renee Calloway. She was 26, a part-time dental assistant, raising her daughter Megan alone after separating from her husband, Troy Calloway, 3 months earlier. The separation was not friendly. According to family members and court documents from the divorce filing, Troy had been controlling, financially manipulative, and increasingly hostile after Renee told him she wanted out of the marriage. He contested custody. He contested the separation of assets. He hired an attorney before Renee could afford one. On the night of November 17, 1994, a neighbor called 911 after noticing the front door of Renee's house had been open for several hours. When officers arrived, they found Renee unresponsive in her bed. Megan was crying in her crib in the adjacent room, unharmed but hungry. The paramedics declared Renee dead at the scene. The responding officer noted no visible signs of forced entry, no signs of struggle, and a prescription bottle of oxycodone on the nightstand. The medical examiner performed an autopsy. Toxicology results showed elevated levels of opioids in Renee's system. However, and this was critical, the autopsy also noted petechial hemorrhaging in the eyes, which is often associated with asphyxiation. But in 1994, with opioids present and no other physical evidence flagged, the ME classified the death as a probable accidental overdose. The case was closed within 6 weeks. Troy Calloway was never interviewed as a suspect. He was granted full custody of Megan by default. Megan Calloway grew up in her father's household. She had almost no memories of her mother. What she had instead were stories, told by her mother's sister, Diane, and by Renee's friends from the dental office. They all said the same thing. Renee was not a drug user. She was careful, organized, focused on Megan. She had never been prescribed oxycodone by her own physician. Megan was 14 when she first read the autopsy report. She found it in a box of court documents at Diane's house. She didn't understand all of it, but she understood 2 words: petechial hemorrhaging. She looked it up. And from that moment, the overdose explanation never made sense to her again. At 19, Megan filed a formal request with the county medical examiner's office to have her mother's case reviewed. The request was denied, the case was closed, and there was no new evidence to justify reopening it. At 22, she tried again. Denied. At 25, she contacted the Oregon State Police Cold Case Division. They told her they would add it to a list of cases under review. She called back every 3 months for 2 years. Each time, the case was still on the list. Nothing had changed. Megan did not stop. She built a timeline of her mother's final weeks using documents from the divorce proceedings, interviews with Diane, and records she obtained through Freedom of Information requests. She tracked down 2 of the responding officers from the original scene, both retired, and asked them questions no one had asked in decades. One of them told her something that changed everything. He said that when he arrived on the scene, the prescription bottle on the nightstand was unopened. The seal was intact. He remembered because he thought it was odd at the time, but it was never documented in the report. If the bottle was sealed, where did the opioids in Renee's system come from? Cold Case Project, a nonprofit that partners with law enforcement to review potentially misclassified deaths. The organization agreed to take the case. They requested that the county re-examine the original autopsy evidence using updated forensic toxicology methods. In particular, They wanted to determine whether the opioid concentration in Renee's system was consistent with voluntary ingestion or forced administration. The results came back in early 2023. The updated toxicology analysis found that the opioid levels in Renee's bloodstream were far above what a single oral dose would produce, even in someone with no tolerance. The concentration pattern was more consistent with intravenous or intramuscular administration. Renee did not swallow those pills. Someone injected her. The county medical examiner officially reclassified Renee Calloway's death from accidental overdose to homicide in April 2023. The Oregon State Police reopened the case. Investigators re-examined the original scene evidence, re-interviewed witnesses, and subpoenaed Troy Calloway's financial and phone records from 1994. Records that had been preserved in the divorce file but never reviewed by investigators. Those records showed that Troy had purchased a prepaid phone card on the afternoon of November 17th, the day Renee died, and that the oxycodone prescription on the nightstand had been filled at a pharmacy 40 miles from Renee's home, under a name that matched a former co-worker of Troy's who had died 2 years earlier. Troy Calloway was arrested in September 2024 and charged with first-degree murder in the death of Renee Calloway. He was 58 years old. Megan was 31. She had spent her entire adult life trying to get someone to listen. It took nearly 3 decades. But the autopsy report she read at 14 years old was right. Her mother didn't overdose. And the evidence was always there. Every year in the United States, an estimated 3,000 to 5,000 deaths are misclassified, listed as accidents, suicides, or natural causes when the actual cause was homicide. Some of those cases are eventually corrected. Most are not. The difference, more often than not, is whether someone keeps asking questions. Megan Calloway was 18 months old when her mother was taken from her. She grew up in the household of the man who, according to the state of Oregon, killed her. She didn't have evidence. She didn't have training. She didn't have institutional support. What she had was a 2-word finding on an autopsy report and the refusal to let it go. The evidence spoke. It was written in the report from the very beginning. It just took 30 years for someone to read it the right way. If this case stayed with you, subscribe to Evidence Speaks. We open a new case every week and leave a comment. Do you think misclassified deaths should be automatically reviewed with modern forensics?